Um, I find this question very overwhelming. I am a person who, um, okay, well, I need to tell a little story about someone else. Um, when I was in high school, I knew this kid, Matt, and he was always in relationships and getting his heart broken. And my boyfriend at the time, Matt's going through yet another breakup. And my boyfriend goes, poor Matt, he just has so much love to give. And like, that is true of Matt, but I think that's true of me also because I have like an unlimited, ridiculous supply of love to give. I don't know. And it like sometimes sucks and it sometimes is good. So, like, that's probably my number one thing. Like, I'm just a person who has too much love to give. Oh, man. That's my crusade. I think like the way it manifests. Well, okay. Also, like for context, I'm really astrologically inclined. So, as a Scorpio, which is my sun sign, I'm really intense. And if it's romantic love, forget it. I like black out and go in. So, my husband just gets like absolutely smothered with love at all times and like attention and intensity. Um, the children in my life do too, my cat, family members and friends that I love. Also, like as a result of that, I'm overwhelming love, like ray focus. I only can direct, like, you'll know if I love you that much because I only direct it at you if I do. And if I don't, it like you might fall to the wayside. Obviously, with family, that's more common because friends are more chosen. So with family, there might be folks who just like if they don't resonate just because we're related by blood, I'm not gonna like direct it all. But as a teacher of ninth graders, which is my job, I just blasted at them. And it's kind of like a nice medium for like the unlimited like love flow that I seem to obsessively, I don't know, emit. No. And I would say, I don't know why high school is the theme now, but I think also because I work at the high school I went to, there it just like is up top for me. You know what I mean? Yeah. So in high school, my a teacher that I was really close to put in my yearbook like you'll always know love, and I was like, why did she write that? Like she didn't write that for my friends. Like I don't know. And then just that was a teacher whose like opinion and perspective was super formative for me. And so I always like knew in the back of my mind, like, this is her belief. And she's like a very wise person. And so, but no, it's not always something that I've been in touch with per se. But I think also like with age and maturing and becoming comfortable with myself, I'm able to like just acknowledge that that is like a blessing and sometimes a curse, you know? I just think it's a choice to have a connection with someone where you are just able to safely and comfortably assume the best of them. I think you can do it's not what I'm saying that what I'm just said, you can do with strangers, right? You can like get cut off on the freeway and assume that person must be late to work or like that person's going to the hospital and like that is a loving act in and of itself, I think. But I think it's a choice and I think it as an adult, almost 30-year-old woman, it feels largely like it has to be somewhat reciprocal. And it's just like an energy transference, I guess. But you can, I don't know about a lot of things I believe like the universe impacts and such. But I do think you can choose if you're going to lead with love or if you're going to be able to give it even if it's not coming back, which like I guess is a big part of teaching adolescents too. Okay. Okay. So just the sign is like the intensity of the emotion, I think. Well, that's the sun sign is, people say sun, moon, rising. So my sun sign is Scorpio. I really feel it. It's my phone case. And it just, one of the things it means is like passionate, intensity, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of how the love like manifests, I suppose, in my brain, which is the blessing and the curse. Because yeah, I feel, the whole spectrum of emotions like on a Tuesday, but which like makes me like arguably a good teacher, which makes me, a good writer or a good, friend at times, especially if I can like reflect it back to you. And I'm like a really loyal friend if you're like in the love orb. But it can really be painful to me and has caused me a lot of suffering as well. And I'm doing this, and my moon sign is a Libra, which is the scales. So the intensity around love and such, it makes me other subcategories that are like questionable, such as an empath. Some might say a highly sensitive person. Whether or not you subscribe to those things as categories of humanity, I don't know. But like I a little bit can jive with them, or just, I'm open to those to things. And so I don't know, being a loving and open person, being an empathic person, being someone who's sensitive to others' energies and moods. I am an insane teacher in that, like, there's 40 people in a room and I like am assessing all their moods, and I'm asking you if you won your game or not yesterday. Like I remember everything they say, a lot of it. And it makes me a good teacher in that they feel comfortable, or they might trust me, or they might open up, which is really important for that age group. So that feels good. I've had problems with so on the flip side, I've had problems with boundaries, because also like if you're not raised, which like not sure any of us were raised to really see and set boundaries, because that might be relatively new psychologically. I mean, I've only heard about it for the last, 5 or so years. So I don't know if people were cognitive about that as a word yet, back when we were being raised. But being, also, I don't know, I guess being Mexican too. Boundaries are just not really like, they don't really fit. They're kind of too Western. They don't really fit with the cultural standards. So I have struggled with blurring of lines. And like back when I was an early teacher, like, a student comes to me with their trauma, internalizing like ruined day, ruined week, like kind of thing. And that is just not sustainable if you're an educator at any capacity. And I think also like society, just personally, so aside from the job stuff, society doesn't really if you're a person who's a sensitive person, if you're an empathic person, there's so many other features that might go along with that society does not celebrate, or at least American individualistic society doesn't super celebrate. So that kind of brings the pain in. I think you can learn to become, especially with age, maturity, introspection, you can learn to accept things that other people think are unacceptable about yourself. But that doesn't mean, even at the end of that rope, society still is pushing productivity and capitalism, which don't necessarily jive with like sitting with feelings and processing of feelings and regulating. So that's kind of where the suffering has come in, I think. I think I'm beautiful because I would say the love thing, but then I said that's who I am. But I think that that makes me beautiful because I do think I am really intuitive and really attuned to people. And, while I feel very introverted in most ways, I do feel like I can be like, I don't know, I think I can be pretty healing. And obviously loving, like I've already said 400 times. And so I think I really love those things about myself. And I think those are beautiful things in people. Those are beautiful qualities a person can have. I think with old age, 28. What? Okay. I think, I think, I went through a lot of different traumas, and I just wasn't that introspective until during puberty and college. I just didn't have to be. I think everything was kind of in enough equilibrium that I didn't have to see, I don't know. And so once, and I went through some more traumas, and then they kind of pushed me to see. And after you suffer so much, there's so many different ways things can go. For me, the suffering made it so that I had to be anal about my own healing because there was no other option. The other option, arguably, would have been annihilation. So I had to be. It's like this or I can't exist kind of thing. So I learned a lot about healing. I had to pick up a lot of philosophical. I started studying philosophy. I started studying psychology. I started studying Eastern philosophy and doing yoga teacher training and stuff. Now it's just an organic interest. It was in service of my own healing, but now I obviously try to be a healing presence without ideally overstepping a boundary if someone's not coming to me for healing. But being a healing presence doesn't mean that I want to solve your problems per se, but that my presence in your life, if we have a loving connection and a respectful connection, an open connection, whether you're a child and a student or my husband's friend or something, it means that I'm open to facilitating some of your healing with what I know and with what you know, if you're open to it. So my moon sign is Libra. So I'm really interested in aesthetics, which is just the first layer, hyper interested. My husband, well, I've always been into fashion and style and art. But when I started dating my husband, he got me into design, kind of more abstractly. And then we kind of got into architecture, interior design and stuff. So it's also my husband's business. We just think about the way things look a lot. Now, aside from aesthetics, I see beauty in human connection and also in nature, just like everybody else. I think that my highest and idealist self is lives in nature and is way more in nature. My life's pretty urban. That's where I see beauty, but I really do see it with humans. I think more where it makes your heart feel literally warm and it drops. That might be more on a human level than anywhere else, which is surprising because think I'm an introvert and I like to be a hermit, but it is true. I think it's very beautiful. I think it comes down to like also the love thing. So it comes down to like, how do you fundamentally inherently see humanity? You know, do you see humanity as evil or good inherently or neutral, I guess? And I think sometimes to heal and to be open, you have to just sort of embrace, at least without necessarily saying cement in stone like humans are good, but like embrace their goodness and focus on it and highlight it. And so part of that is like, this is a parenting technique as well. Sorry, parenting books are fun. Part of that is finding awe. And I think it's easy, or it's like socially we're, conditioned somewhat to find awe in a sunset or find awe in Yosemite on a cliff. But are we conditioned to find it when I legit feel awe if some stranger smiles at me while holding the door open? I'm like, holy, wow, like that is, now I gotta pass it on. And then you feel, you might feel awe when like you're the person ringing you up at the grocery store, like comments on something you're getting, like it just costs them nothing. And there's nothing they can gain from the interaction, but they're still making a bid towards you. I just think that's beautiful. But then when you bring kids into it, it's like astronomical because they don't know. They're not really metacognitive about what they're doing unless they're, maybe seniors. So little kids doing it, mind blowing. High school kids doing it, also mind blowing. Yeah, that's, it's just really nice to see compassion amongst them, or like thought going into the way that they act. But towards another person, it's like, oh, because it's like they're learning how to do that. They're at the beginning. So it's really crazy to witness that. Okay. One part of the museum is full of alien artifacts because I love aliens. Like, I just can't get deep with this. I gotta ref the aliens. Then, like, near the alien wing, because it's a huge museum, is like a witchcraft area, but like ancient witchcraft. I love old and spooky because I'm a Scorpio. And Halloween vibes. So we have the alien and the witch sides. I like the idea of like ancestral artifacts being its own wing. Then another wing on that note is um, my family's so Catholic, my Mexican side, but that doesn't resonate with me. And I know at some point, well, at some point we were Jewish, but at another point there were some indigenous Mexican religions there that have been like absolutely lost and stamped out. So that would be a cool wing, but specifically whatever my family was practicing, there would be their indigenous traditions that they slip through your fingers when like the Catholicism and the colonization are entrenched in some Mexican cultures, my Mexican culture, very Catholic. On the flip side, we have, I'm Hawaiian, and a lot of those cultural indigenous traditions have also been lost in terms of the way my family practiced. So that would be its own wing, a Hawaiian indigenous traditions wing and a Mexican one too. Those would be really cool. And then like maybe, I don't know, that I'm really inspired by those museums that are like, there's one, I don't know. And I went to one in Tokyo and it was like love themed. And there were like rooms about people's heartbreaks and stuff. That's really my jam. So like not my love stories only, but, and I like heartbreak stories. Um, my heartbreak stories and love stories and like interesting peoples would be the other room. So there'd be love, aliens, witches, and two different indigenous um, traditions areas. I just really, I think like historically I'm interested in the witchcraft or like Salem witch trials era of American history, when American history generally is not super fascinating to me, but I am interested in that and that resonates. I don't know with what. And then I think due to Catholic upbringing, I always saw witches or associated them with Satan growing up, which is like kind of laughable now. Um, and I don't consider myself, this is private, but I'm gonna say it. I don't consider myself like a witch the way that some might, but I do indulge in certain rituals. I do indulge in certain spells. They're only positive. I'm not like, it's sort of a religious spiritual thing for me. I wouldn't say that when I do it, I'm like, this is going to yield a result. I'm just like, I want to try it. It seems fun and I'm open. And I think because of years of like religious guilt um, and intense conditioning, I just, this is sort of also like maybe a rebellion of all that and being like, wow, I'm going to let myself explore this thing that I was told was satanic. Which like when you actually get into it, you realize, you learn, no, it's not, that's not even close. And you can be a Catholic person who lights a candle or tries to manifest a dream like that. Those are not mutually exclusive per se, but only one side is telling you that they are, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Well, not this isn't in regards to the museum per se, but in regards to being multiracial and how important it is to one's identity. I think it's really difficult now to determine your place in a social conversation. When you're multiracial, it's super difficult because you're just being, I don't know, there's just like a fracturing that's organic to your identity, I suppose. And I think for me, I always wanted to orient myself closer to whiteness, which is part of my identity. I am a little bit white. And I don't know when, realized that that wasn't serving me and that I felt othered for so long. And it wasn't just because organically I'm a weird outsider person per se, which I do think I am in some ways, but also because I wasn't white and I was in a white space. And that was just the only reason that I was weird. As a result, both of my parents, my biological parents who I like spend time with, are mixtures of a colonizing entity. I mean, many people are, right? But they are both mixtures of a colonizing entity and an indigenous one, both of them. In my mother's case, indigenous Mexican and Spanish. In my father's case, indigenous Hawaiian, Korean, and Scottish. And the Korean and Scottish sides both kind of colonized Hawaii. So I found myself after the journey of trying to orient myself to whiteness, now trying to orient myself to like indigenousness and feeling like, I don't know the circumstances under which I am that. So I am like DNA wise, genetically, a certain percentage of these different things, but how did they enter into my bloodstream, and like odds are how consensual was that integration into my bloodstream. So that really messed with my brain, and I was like I don't feel Spanish, like I don't identify with Spain, like Spain's cool, but I don't feel Spanish at all. I feel Mexican, but I also don't feel indigenous, I don't feel Mayan per se. um, and I definitely do feel Hawaiian in a lot of ways, and I do not feel Scottish or identify with that. And especially no, in Mexico too, but in Hawaii, I had a lot of Scottish relatives who had power, like who knows, kind of those dynamics. I mean, we never can know. So I think that is part of my crusade of I grew up like, you grow up in America, you grow up with Western medicine, you grow up with the Western side. I grow up with like the colonizer parts of my identity. Granted, I'm not surrounded by Spaniards and Scottish people, but you know what I mean. The colonizer part of my identity is like very much around me and is the standard whiteness, I suppose. So I just don't feel, I feel continuously like not served by it. And I feel that so much of my humanity and things that would feel right are lost by those lost traditions. I think that like you can get really finite, like just medically, I think medically that if I could use some indigenous, treatments that my family passed down that got lost by Spaniards or Western medicine, like that those could be more healing to me than something that is widely accepted in Western medicine, like a Motrin or an antidepressant or something like that. I just feel like, and a lot of us are out of touch with our indigenous traditions, and that just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like good. And especially in America, when, a lot of us are or children of immigrants or like, second or third generation, then you're even more disconnected from your origins. And there are answers there. Like your blood and your body respond to those answers. I don't know. That's my crusade again. I think that heartbreaks are very educational. I think falling in love and out of love and grappling with all those things are just so informative and so exciting. And so that's why I love to follow people's love stories. I used to tell my friend, like, what's the point of writing if you're not going to write about love? Now that has like a little bit subsided with age and getting married and like your focus is redirect a little bit, but I still think it's so exciting and so fascinating. So that's why. I think all I have to say about writing is I used to write a lot and it's so part of my identity. Everything I studied in college was around writing. I majored in English, I majored in linguistics, just all about writing. And I really lost it. And I did an assignment that I had my students do because I like to do it too to make sure, is this lame or how do I teach this? So I did it myself. It was a writing assignment. I wrote a short story and I read it to a class. Now, granted, this class really likes me, but they were like, oh, if this were a book, we would read it. And I was just like, oh, like, I know I need to be creating more and writing more specifically. And so that is a goal for the future. I think I'm going to have some career shifting. And so I think that's going to be like one of the top two, well, a very high focus of the career shifts. Okay. The short story prompt, it's just, this is from the curriculum given to me by San Diego Unified. So it's not something I invented, but we're reading excerpts from House on Mango Street. And we basically read a short story and then we recreate it about ourselves because it's so biographical kind of about the author. So it's really easy to just be like, why don't you write about your house instead of the house on Mango Street? Yeah. So we read one that was a cause and effect. That's like a skill we're having to teach. Cause and effect, cause and effect. So it was just write a cause and effect that happened to you that affected your life. So I chose to write about, I try to write, when I write for them, I write from myself at their age so that they care. I could write about something that happened to me and my husband, they don't care. So I wrote about 14-year-old me. And I wrote about how I was so absolutely in love with this person. And he gave my best friend a rose on Valentine's Day. And I went to school, like kind of expecting to get a Valentine from him and like hoping. And he gave it to my best friend. And she was very lame about it. And so I wrote about the cause was her getting the rose, and the effect was like she and I had like a big conflict, and we eventually were friends again, but not the same. So that's what I wrote about, and they like really care. They really are invested. And so yeah, that's what sparked the whole writing again. Thoughts? Ooh, I think that it is really nice to have a product. There's so many elements to it. I think if you're a reader, there's just, I don't know if this is true, but I read a lot, obviously, as an English teacher. And I just have so many moments where I read something so inspiring that I'm like, I have stories like this in my head, or something that's happened to me that's similar that like I would like to communicate. So that kind of makes creative writing appealing when you're consuming so much. At some point you're like, I could output this too. And then the other side is every single therapist I've ever seen, or like any psychologist, will tell you that you need to write. Like if you're not feeling good, you need to write to process. Now, do I always listen to them? No, I ignore them a lot. I'm not writing up the storm, but I think that that's true. I think it's a huge way of processing. And I think people avoid their emotions and their hard ones. And what better way to sit with something than to write it down? It kind of is there's a semi-permanence, but then there's the like really nice thing that you can like burn a piece of paper or delete a file. So it's not permanent. But the tangible, like, I don't know, the cognitive experience of maybe rereading later. I don't usually get rid of what I write, even if no matter how inflammatory it is. Yeah, that's really nice. And it's psychologically good for you. Is there something core I'm trying to communicate in my writing? I think just like maybe unbridled acceptance. The end. I think that so what let me just get specific. I am like feeling that young adult books might be the move because I work with that population, or like young adult stories might be the move. And I can really get in their heads. I think society kind of erases them, disrespects, and like beats them down, adolescents. And I think writing to them as an adult is just a respect exchange. So I'm saying like I'm by writing this from your perspective that I still can empathize with and remember egregiously, I validate that you matter and that your perspective in society matters, and that like I accept you for the good. You know, this generation is really comfortable with activism and has made a lot of social progress, and the bad that like yeah, they're also still hormonal and still everything's up here, and they're very egocentric and they're very insecure. That's normal with that age. So that's kind of what I think when you read something that's resonates, you feel like some sort of acceptance. I think I've already touched on it, but I think as someone who has been through many traumas, and I am a person with depression and anxiety as well, I just, I don't know. It has made me into a person that is obsessive about suffering and healing. And I think that that's like it's sort of like the bad things that are like the seeds that plant for you to grow. But that doesn't mean that everyone responds to trauma that way. It takes, or that I'm exceptional for responding to trauma that way, or that I don't have setbacks. I don't feel that way. I feel that it's like the perfect storm also. But yeah, I think that I wouldn't be so open, and I wouldn't be just trying to radically embrace positivity where I can if I hadn't suffered so much, which I have, and I continue to. So, both. I think I wasn't raised to sit with discomfort. That's not on my parents. I'm saying like by everybody, by society. Like I am a person who feels cognitively they cannot handle discomfort, which is partially anxiety. I am anxious and fearful of hard things and hard conversations and hard feelings. There have been a number of times in my life, where I've had to just swallow that something's gonna not be good and I have to deal with it. For example, you and I met in Berlin. When I touched down in Berlin, my anxiety was the worst it's ever been in my life. I was moving away from my new boyfriend of months, who's now my husband, and my family. And I threw up immediately into my apartment toilet immediately. And I just could not have felt worse. I hadn't eaten in 48 hours. I had to get up. I had to go to orientation in another city. I had to take a train 4 hours and I had to go. And I knew I had to go. So obviously that moment just really like ultimately kind of made me stronger. And I am in one of those phases where I'm grappling with something, a situation that doesn't feel right for me, and I still have to stay in it. And that is just for me really hard. I think sometimes when you're someone who's suffered or you've had, I don't know, yeah, a trauma, it makes sometimes like it makes it so that when you're suffering, you just want to be, it's a normal trauma response to not be able to stomach it anymore. You're just like, oh, I have suffered before, and if it's going to happen again and I can remove myself, I really want to, because I don't want to deal with that. So I'm in that situation where I'm having to expand in such a way that I can be in a situation that's temporary, long term. It's long term but temporary. I have to be okay with the fact that it's going to be good and bad, but it feels not right for me. And that is requiring all the expansion, because I am not used to sitting with discomfort. I am used to being so scared of it. I have to just remember like Berlin me that was able to get off the ground of the bathroom and go to the train station. I trust the universe, which is also what makes things less painful. A little less. The suffering is still suffering, but I think the hard thing, so I'm just going to get a little more incisive, is that it's job suffering. I think the hard thing is when you're good at something and you're continuously rejected by it. And there's some arenas where that makes sense. If I want to be a film director, yeah, I'm going to deal with so much rejection, and that's like embedded. In other arenas, it's hard to deal with. And I think so that is a struggle of like, I can be good at my job and I can still feel it's not right for me anymore. Trusting the universe comes in when you say like some I'm going to read the signs I'm getting. This is an English teacher thing. I read my signs. If I hear no from someone 4 times, I mean, it seems like obvious, right? But I'm going to like embrace that that's a no and that it's not meant for me, even if I'm good at it, even if blah, blah, blah. So I think, I don't know, I trust the universe, and I trust that even if something feels like a seismic shift, that I'm listening to it. I think not trusting the universe would mean I would stay in a situation that continuously tells me no. And I would ignore those no's because in my head, I'm meant to do this. well, what's my body telling me and what's the universe telling me? I listen to both, and both of them are saying no, so I trust them. So it's not, so I don't really need anything from the universe, but just to like ultimately provide clarity, which it will. Um, Here I go. Scorpio shit. Okay. I am super grateful for my husband. It's so lame. I think it's like really like hopefully in everyone's life something is like stable and rooted. And obviously for me, my career is not. But my stupid husband is so stupid. But I just struggle to even articulate it. I don't know why. Anyway, I'm really grateful for him. I think he is um he just is like obviously right for me at this time in life. I don't like to say dramatic things about forever or anything, but he is like obviously correct for me. And he's just, even with his own career like craziness, he's just like so in love, and so he's just probably more loving than me. So all those things I said, like I'm second place of the loving awards. He's like probably first. And then our cat and our home, they are really and my family, they really keep me afloat during a difficult time. But it's really nice to come home to like my immediate family, which is my cat and my husband and my home. And that's what I'm grateful for. Okay. Here's my healing parting message. I think that our inner children are absolutely in control of us in a lot of ways. So I would say one of the big psychological moments I'm in the midst of, and I really recommend just like I'm trying to expose it to whoever's listening, is healing my inner child. That can literally mean indulging in the things that brought you joy as a child from an obvious adult scale, like coloring or art, right? That's like something that I think society has said, duh. I also have been eating candies that I ate as a child, making dinners that were my favorite comfort foods as a kid, rice and beans with powdery Parmesan cheese. I have Disney Plus and I will watch my favorite movies from when I was a kid. And I am someone who doesn't watch, like, I am not interested in child things really as an adult. I'm not like a person who watches Disney movies that are new, but it is very enjoyable empathizing with your young self, very enjoyable, and giving them the love and attention that they deserve now. So I would say to tune into your inner child because it's coming out. Oh my God. Ninth grade Natalie would be so happy to hear that I am married because she was so concerned with finding love. She would be elated. I would just say to her, you will surpass all your expectations for yourself. And yeah, I think that little me would think that old me is pretty cool. So I just think, yeah, like more than what I dreamed ended up kind of coming true. So I would reassure myself of that because little me was absolutely crippled with anxiety. So she would love to hear that. So here's what little me would love. I'm just gonna talk from her perspective so I don't get so embarrassed because it's embarrassing. I'm not good at like even getting a birthday song. Um, Little me would love like that my husband and I like thrift and find vintage clothes, and like it's just so like no one wears what I wear because I got it at a thrift store for $2, like this shirt from the 80s. Little me would love that. Love that I have a cat. Love that we are like dramatic about cooking and just design and everything. Like, I don't think she would have been happy if I turned into like a suburban lady. But I'm like, I live near downtown, got a husband, we do cool stuff. She would like that. She would be like, what are you doing teaching at this high school? But other than that, she would be really hyped about specifically the cat and the husband. I think she'd be like, yes, finally, yes.